Content warning. This podcast contains bones, blood, smut, and swear words.
Before we get into the good shit this week, we wanted to remind you that we've launched a Patreon. For just a few bucks a month, you get extended games, brand new content, access to our notes and murder boards, and much more. So, if you would like to be part of sponsoring Hannah's burgeoning business as ambiance purveyor to the 9 houses, you can head to patreon.com/frontlinefifth or follow the link in the show notes. Okay. Now back to that sweet, sweet bone zone action.
Wait! Last week during our spoiler section, I brought up a fan theory that had me cackling. So before we do anything else, I want to give a shout out to Emily L., patron, princess of the third, certified bone witch. If you have theories, send them my way, and I will take 8 to 12 business weeks to figure out how to use Instagram and or email, but by Jod, I will find and love them. Act 1. Welcome, penitents. Hello and welcome to the Frontline Fifth, a Lock Tomb podcast where newly minted lictors, barely into double digits, explore the Lock Tomb series for the first time while a couple of dried-out bone witches cackle over how little they really know. We're currently reading Harrow the Ninth by Tamsin Muir, and this week we're taking notes on absolutely everything, including one another, in chapters 16, 17, and 18. I'm Hannah, and like Augustine, I'm waiting for my biographer. Unlike Mercy Morn, I fucking hate anatomy and would have thrown myself into the river to be consumed by ghosts if I had to spend more than 8 weeks learning about it.
Hannah, how can you possibly be a developmental biologist if you hate learning anatomy?
Brooke, I'm so glad you asked me this question. There actually are 2 types of developmental biologists. There's people who like anatomy, and those people are people I attempt to tolerate. And then there's people who like genetic pathways, and that's me and all the cool people. I don't like remembering the specific names. I like patterning. I like how genes come together.
All right.
But none of this matters because I am joined today by fellow 10,000-year-old Marie. Marie, what would you spend 10,000 years learning?
Microscopy. I'm shit at it. I have gotten so much better, but it's really funny to me that I'm a microbiologist and I'm terrible with a microscope. I'm okay with a microscope. I don't know any of the fancy microscopy though. I can't do fluorescence microscopy.
You know, that might actually be useful in this world of lictors, considering thanergy. So much of the flipping of thalergy to thanergy is based off of microbes.
Yeah, right?
Okay, better microscopy in the 9 houses. So also with us today are the sweet little 10-year-old lictors looking out at the horizon of time and anticipating 9,990 more years of hanging out on a space station with people you semi-hate. So Brooke, John, what are you going to fill the millennia learning?
I'm kind of upset. I think my favorite and most rewarding hobby is probably impossible in this world of lictordom.
Gardening?
What is it?
I am a gardener.
Yeah.
From Earth. I have never had the urge to try hydroponics either. I like worms. It is what it is. So this is kind of depressing. I don't exactly know how I'm going to become an expert gardener when we're on a space station. Unless I get into hydroponics, which again just doesn't sound appealing. But
I feel like you could use necromancy to rot bodies into compost really efficiently.
Maybe,
no?
I don't know.
Yeah, composting on point, just nothing to really use it for.
Yeah. So what? Space rock mixed with organic human waste? Gross. Yuck.
Well, they're already making soap out of body fat and stuff, right? It seems like we're recycling humans anyway.
It's a pretty morbid idea. Anyway. We'll see.
What about you, John?
This actually touches on such a sore spot for me because I hate this trope in pretty much all books, which is that there's some form of magic system where you basically just have to spend time learning it and then you become all powerful. And the people in the universe are bored of learning it or don't put any effort in. And the biggest, most egregious one that always comes to mind is Harry Potter, where the only person that cares about learning magic is the one muggle person that's holy shit, we're actually learning magic. Maybe I should put some effort into learning thing. And so it's for me, I would be spending 10,000 years learning everything about necromancy. The Harry Potter thing is so annoying because it's I don't want to go to charms class where I can learn how to make things fly. And it really only takes knowing a couple of words and some very light choreography, which I would probably struggle at because my sense of timing and rhythm is horrific. But 10,000 years, I'm becoming the best necromancer I can. And then once my brain is mush at the end of every day, I'm working my way through a backlog of all of the single player video games that I have not like finished.
Of course
so
you
like
are.
I'm assuming there's a lot of those.
That's a phenomenal answer. And I would like to counter this just a little bit, John, because I did watch you dance at your wedding and you did a great job. So you can even learn choreography.
It's true. We have all seen
But
this.
as for me, I've spent the last 10,000 years learning how to take a nap anywhere under any circumstances. And I'm planning on spending the next 10,000 years learning Quenya, Klingon, and Huttese.
What is Huttese?
Which are
Jabba the Hutt?
Jabba the Hutt's language.
No.
Usawaba Han Solo.
No.
Oh God, before we compare notes on our crew this week, what did you all think about these chapters?
Dude, the insults were amazing. Okay, so I have this hill that I will die on, and that's that I think that swear words as insults are lazy, and they are a symptom
Facts.
of a society that doesn't value brains enough.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that calling people assholes or bitches or dicks, whatever, like that's a shortcut. You don't really get to the heart of a problem. So it's going to be really hard for people to know how to improve as our society becomes stunted. Someone who cuts in line isn't just an asshole. There's someone who overinflates their self-importance relative to others, and they misconstrue their inability to exhibit basic skills of patience or time management for some perceived sense of primary privilege. Not just an asshole.
God. This is
so much more.
amazing. Be specific in your insults.
Yes.
Thank you, Brooke.
And
That
it will
was
save
beautiful.
society. This is my hill that I will die on.
Tamsin Muir saving society one insult at a time. What about you, John?
I basically just sum this up as more tidbits, more super interesting stuff. We're continuing to just pave the way and like building up to something, and we're getting more and more pieces. So reckless speculation, but still haven't gotten to like the actual like entree. Yeah, we're still in the like hors d'oeuvres part of the
what is
the
it they
book
give
here.
you?
Aperitif?
No. Sometimes they show up at the table before, like when you first get there, and they give you the happy mouth, amuse-bouche.
Amuse-bouche.
Yeah. So many amuse-bouche. Where's the meal?
Oh God.
I think that my thing is especially on a reread, I adore the ridiculous dynamic between Jod and his lictors. Like Augustine getting pissy with him, that he's like taking over the lecture, and I especially love his like, I mean, I love the tack you're taking. I hadn't thought to scare the living wee out of them with. They'll eat you alive, starting with your feet.
And John's like, sorry, you can teach it.
He's like, yeah, go on, like keep teaching. I hadn't thought to take that perspective.
This makes sense that they eventually would just become the worst backseat drivers, all of them, for one another. My big takeaway from this week, I had not really thought about this until Marie and Brooke both said that they think that if they were left out to dry for 10,000 years, they'd become Mercy Morn. And it's increasingly clear to me that if I were left out to dry for more than about 1,000 years, I would instantly become Augustine. I'm more than half of the way there.
You said that, and I was like, this tracks. I will be Mercy to your Augustine, but hopefully maybe we don't hate each other as much.
With a little bit less hatred.
Oh.
All right, let's send it to our meme watch. I see that Marie has pasted in. Would you like to describe your meme, Marie?
So this is a Homestar Runner meme, which before we started recording, we were talking about Homestar Runner references, and you, Hannah, were like, I knew it.
Sorry, I adore Homestar Runner. I was Trogdor for Halloween once. But I actually didn't know that this one was from Homestar Runner.
I didn't either, but I have spent a lot looking at other people's tracking the memes, and so I looked this up. So the reference in text is Ianthe's conversation with Harrow, where Harrow's like, why are you groveling for Augustine? And Ianthe being like, why wouldn't I want a fucking mentor? And she tells Harrow, we're puppies, you and I with my lame paw, which makes sense, her arm, and you with 3 legs missing, insisting you can make it on your own. And so this was apparently like a little
deep cut.
A little puppy drawing that Homestar Runner would like keep pulling out as like a regular joke, I guess, where it's this little puppy called Lil Brudder with 3 legs missing. He only has 1 leg. And his catchphrase is, I can make it on my own.
It's hilarious. I we won't remember, but I hope we remember to link it in the show notes because just Google it, dear listener. It's pretty fucking funny.
Oh, I also have SAT prep for us.
I'm very excited about this week's SAT prep. You did a great job, Marie.
I gotta say, I've started reading these chapters being prepared for Marie's little tests.
It's just I really love these words. And I think I knew what all of them were except for one of them, which is fine. Anyway, so we are going to match these words to dwarf names. Okay?
What?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like happy and dopey and grumpy?
I'll give you the
Okay.
dwarf names and I'll give you the words. Okay?
Oh, understood. Okay.
Yeah. The 4 words are cinereous, bilious, mediastinum, and somnolent. And your dwarf names to match them to are sleepy, ashy, nasty, and hardy.
All right, I got immediate guesses. Okay. Are we doing this as a team or are we just going to vote?
Oh, let's just shout them out. Send it.
All right. We know that cinereous is ashy, right? Cinders.
Yes. Right.
Yeah, that one's definitely ashy. Bilious is nasty. It's like bile. You want to vomit.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Somnolent is definitely sleepy.
I think so. And then that leaves mediastinum with hardy, and that feels just arbitrarily correct.
Right. I didn't know that one. That was the one I didn't know
me
of
neither.
before.
Apparently, it's like, and it's like hard to get a good definition for it, but it's basically like this chest cavity space that maybe sometimes refers to like the division, like it's like the middle space. I don't know.
No anatomists
Well,
here.
I think we did a great job. With that, get out your quill pens and prepare to ask some uncomfortable questions as we present Harrow the Ninth, Episode 7. At least we suffer together. Act 2. Do you try to sound as portentous as possible, or does it just sort of happen naturally?
This section of Frontline 5th is safe for anyone who hasn't read past Chapter 18 in Harrow the Ninth.
Let's recap. Chapter 16. Fifth House Skull. 6 months before the Emperor's murder. You take notes. Mercy and Augustine at each other's throats. The inside skinny on resurrection beasts. Chapter 17. Eighth House Skull. Mercy is not forthcoming. The Saint of Duty wants you dead.
Well, Harrow, eternally paranoid, creates a new cipher just in case Ianthe actually figured out hers while she was in possession of all the letters. And she uses her new uncrackable code to take notes on all her companions. Not to editorialize, but frankly, all the entries are shorter than could possibly be useful. So, for instance, Ianthe's just reads, Ianthe, Willem Tridentarius, the first, unworthy of trust, suspects me mad. I feel like Harrow is kind of a queen of understatements. No? It's
Yeah. Suspects me mad when, like, I think Ianthe, is it in these chapters? Yeah, it is. Like, where she tells her crazy cakes.
Yes. So, I mean, the specific instance where Ianthe calls her crazy cakes, although I have to admit, I think Ianthe probably suspects her mad quite a bit before this.
Yeah.
Harrow's having some weird experiences around Cytherea's tomb. So Cytherea's tomb has some frankly bonkers decor, even in the context of the Mithraeum. And Cytherea's dead-ass corpse just lays there, never rotting, covered in rosebuds. So that would be creepy enough, but there's something else awry. Her body seems to maybe be moving, making sounds, right? And one day, Harrow and Ianthe are walking down the passageway outside, and Harrow hears movement from inside the tomb, and she's like, do you perceive movement from inside the tomb? And Ianthe is like, do you always sound this portentous? Do you try at this? But Ianthe, finally responds, no, I don't hear anything, crazy cakes.
I fucking love Ianthe. I'm like starting, I never understood this, but I'm starting to get it a little bit
Really?
more.
You've read this series so many times. Okay, no, I think she's disgusting in this book. I liked her a little bit for her like sass in the last one, but I think
she's disgusting and awful, but it's like things like this where it's just like a different read on her, like the way that she talks to her.
She's got an aspect of humanity because she's only like 12 years old.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. She's just so fucking funny.
Well, actually, I mean, in terms of aspect of humanity, one of the things Harrow does not write down but mentions in this is that she cries at night still.
Yes.
Like, Ianthe has more going on than her surface level.
She's got a lot of defense mechanisms, yes, that she projects. Right. But Harrow is very portentous. She describes her relationship with Ianthe this week as being very annoyed by Ianthe, to the point that she would one day jerk Ianthe's white and beating heart from her colorless ribcage and eat it dripping before her. Like, what the fuck? I just had this thought. I just want to know, have any of you had to regularly interact with and come to intimately know someone you hate to the point that you would, like, feel this way about them?
Yeah. My biggest problem is if there's somebody who, like, infinitely annoys me and I actually kind of hate them, all it takes is for me to have, like, a long car ride or, like, some sort of task where we are, like, yoked together for a while and actually talking to them. And then I'm like, oh, I don't like you, but I understand you. And the moment I understand you, I don't hate you anymore.
I kind of feel the same. I don't, it's very rare for me to hate anybody to this level. Am I interpreting this wrong? Does she actually not hate her and maybe just is vastly irritated and also very imaginative?
I feel like it can be more than one thing, right? I mean, it is a situation where, like, Marie, when you're yoked to this person that you hate, you know that eventually it will end. Whereas Harrow has potentially an infinite amount of time where the only people that she can interact with are these 5 people. Mercy just is disgusted by her. Augustine basically ignores her. We'll find out about Ortis the First. Jod is complicated, and the person that she relates to most is Ianthe. I do think she understands Ianthe more, and actually I think that they have a weird friendship going on. I think it's mostly annoyance rather than hatred.
It's like an arranged marriage where it's like there is actual, like, dependence and, like, emotional intimacy there. Love?
Yeah.
But the fact that you are so emotionally intimate and so, like, vulnerable to this person also means that it is so much easier to hate
that when they
them.
drive you nuts, you do want to rip their white and beating heart from their colorless ribcage.
Yeah.
And eat it dripping.
Eat it dripping before them.
A phrase you did not examine as carefully as maybe you should have. Sorry.
I also want to point out something that I didn't really, it always, I think, was in the back of my mind, but I never totally caught, which is apparently this is the only lictor's body that they've ever recovered.
So this was really interesting to me. I was thinking about this. In this little area, there's sconces where there are some rapiers hanging, but there aren't that many rapiers hanging. And additionally, there's only the one body. So you're totally right, Marie. I feel like this is like I don't know how much of each part of each lictor they have managed to retain post-mortem.
Well, none from spaghettification, none from Cassiopeia, who got ripped apart
by ghosts. Although, for all we know, her rapier is still there. Like, there's all these, like, it's just kind of a weird...
Because don't they, like, point out the rapier that must have been the Ninth House rapier, even though...
Yes. Yeah, there's one that clearly must have been the Ninth House rapier.
We'll get into it.
Well, yeah. The entry that Harrow puts into her journal for Augustine has a little more juice. So when Harrow goes to ask him about himself, which, by the way, I think is a bold thing to do, so proud of Harrow on this, he's delighted. He goes straight into writing my memoirs mode, which is exactly what I would do.
But also with, like, no good real information because she doesn't know what questions to ask.
Yes. But yeah, so it's all like logistics. It's how tall he is and like what, you can describe my eyes as sinuous. We find out basically that Augustine's cavalier was his own brother, Alfred, which means logically that Augustine murdered his brother to become a lictor.
Oh my God.
Doesn't this refer back to previously where he was like, oh, Cytherea was just lucky that Cytherea Loveday trips off the tongue. Mine would have become unbearably, like, alliterative. Or something.
Which, are you ready for me to be the biggest pedant of all time? I'm in, like, a very pedantry mode this week. Mm-hmm. Somebody misused the word. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Technically, alliterative only includes when consonants are repeated. This would be unbearably assonant. Yep.
Fascinating.
You guys are such nerds.
It's got ass in it. And anybody who's talking about assonance. I mean.
So Augustine has like a lot of this like easygoing charisma on the outside, But on the inside, he is just an empty shell of a person. He's an empty shell of spite. And as deep and portentous as that is, Marie is dying of laughter in the background. So what's going on, Marie?
Are you laughing at my perceived insult?
Yes. Perceived? Keep going. It'll come out. It'll come out in the episode. Maybe we'll figure it out then.
So Augustine is this empty shell of spite, which, as I said, I like. While Marie and Brooke say they'd become Mercy, there's no doubt in my mind that I'm well on my way to becoming Augustine. This is my worst self is like an echoing chamber of spite and just like disgust for the world, couched in all of this, you know, like fun, bubbling, let's write my memoirs, let's play a game kind of energy.
Terrifying, yeah.
Yeah. So Augustine does not have a great relationship with his sister Mercy Morn, which is, of course, the understatement of the myriad. So I'm sure there are more than one examples of Augustine and Mercy having trouble, but we get to watch Harrow.
The way that they describe it, though, is like his face when she's talking of, well, at least we all suffer together.
Yes. That he's always like looking around with those eyes where he's like, ugh, we all hate Mercy, don't we? It's fine. We got to get through it.
So mean.
But of course, that's like the like casual, almost funny, sassy, them hating each other. It turns out that it gets fucking intense behind the scenes. So Harrow is watching from the shadows once and watches them have this tense and bitter encounter that actually is really kind of upsetting. You're going to have to help me unpack this, everyone. Augustine tells Mercy to stop what she's doing. He knows that she's back to the bad old tricks of decades past.
What tricks? What the fuck?
We don't know.
He gives her some advice. 1, be in his airspace less. 2, stop fucking with Kytherea's body. And 3, stop playing the dangerous game she's playing.
What is she doing?
He also... Well, actually, Brooke, John, do you have feelings about this? Is this like, did this mean anything to you? Or were you just
it means,
like,
it means absolutely nothing thus far. I have theories, but we'll see.
And Augustine's pretty clear. Augustine's like, I will kill you before you get me in trouble. And Mercy gives him a look that's basically like, you would not. And Augustine is like, John might have a soft spot for his early lictors, but he's never as sentimental as you think. Augustine says that Jod would forgive Augustine for murdering Mercy eventually. He'd be like, I know why you did it, old chap. Oof. He's incredibly vicious here. He says, you are unnecessary to him. And Mercy basically can't respond at all except to say, but I haven't even touched Kytherea.
What do you think? Is she lying? Is she telling the truth?
I think she's telling the truth.
This says pretty clearly that Kytherea is moving, though, right? Whereas Ianthe is like, fuck off, crazy cakes. Like, clearly Augustine has also noticed something wrong with Kytherea's body.
And didn't also God tell Harrow there's no way, like, they're too superstitious or have too much respect or loved them too much to do something? Like, he rules everybody out.
Yeah. So it's unclear what's happening there. I also actually... Last week we were talking a little bit about Jod as a person and whether he's like a good guy or a bad guy, which of course is a stupid dichotomy. But what kind of insights does this make you feel about Jod? Like, do we believe Augustine's characterization?
I think we see multiple times in this chapter that God has misrepresented or misunderstood his lictors, and I don't know if he's just misrepresenting them or if he's, I guess, is he remembering them as they were 10,000 years ago and not recognizing the changes that have led them to today? Like, I don't know what it is, but he's wrong about a lot of characteristics of his lictors that as we see them.
I also make it feel like, it feels like they're not all rowing in the same direction. The lictors have opposing motives. They're doing something that isn't necessarily what God would want them to do or ask them to do, apparently. Or at least Mercy is. And they definitely don't, like, Mercy and Augustine are not on the same page. And we know that, like, previously they're off doing their own things for, like, decades at a time. So it's like, what do the lictors do? I still don't know.
It's complicated. Augustine has a much better relationship with Ianthe, who he's adopted as his protege and student. He's a big fan, except when it comes to her relationship with her own arm, at which point the Saint of Patience has none. So Harrow's honestly pretty pissed off at Ianthe for cozying up to Augustine and playing teacher's pet. And Ianthe tells her something that I think actually is like a fucking deep insight. Mm-hmm. She says that shame is a privilege. Ianthe cannot afford to be proud, cannot afford to be ashamed of cozying up to Augustine, because they both need to be making themselves appealing to the grown-ups. They're two broken little puppies, and they are surrounded by wolves. Augustine's necromantic focus is spirit magic, and more particularly, creating and crossing barriers between the river and the physical world, which means he's a fan of Ianthe's favorite things, ghosts and liminal spaces and hell. Oh my. So he also knows quite a bit about the RBs. So he tells Ianthe and Harrow a lot that I don't understand about the resurrection beasts. I'm going to try and summarize here. We can talk through it. 1. Revenants, including resurrection beasts, can only inhabit things connected to them. So this could be stuff that they were connected to in life, the thing that killed them, or the things they kill after death.
Oh my god, we are still setting up for Calamities to return as a revenant ghost. Right? Am I right? Like, we had the whole thing in the mysterious study of Dr. Sex where he sees a revenant pass through copper and into a skeleton, blah, 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 blah. Like, I think he put those things together. I think he had a plan. This is what Camilla knew what to do.
I fucking love this for you, Brooke.
This definition doesn't square with what we know about the Dr. Sex story, because what do those skeletons have to do with him?
Good point about it not necessarily being life, necessarily connection to life, because it's more of a connection in death, but maybe there's some misunderstandings.
Yeah, like he came back and inhabited his own body, right? Like initially inside of his own tomb. So I wonder if once you're here, you can jump around.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
But
you need something to get back. Yeah, you need like an anchor.
Yeah, you need a link to get back.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's probably
and then
what
it's
it is.
things that you connect
right.
to.
I'm just saying, if
there.
with that particular fact, what do we got of Calamity? What does Camilla have that Calamity's been like putting on a lot of his own spiritual energy?
Love it.
He's gonna come back as like a clock.
Sorry, that's beautiful. Nope, that feels completely accurate, and I like it. All right, number 2. Resurrection beasts eat thallergenic planets and add them to their corpus. As a result, they're big boys. So number 7 is 50,000 kilometers in diameter. For context, the Earth is about 12,700 kilometers in diameter. So resurrection beast number 7 is multiple times bigger than the Earth.
I did the math, by the way, because initially I was like, oh, that's 4 Earths, but that's in diameter, not in volume. It's 15 times volume.
It's fucking wild. Yeah, big boys. The lictors in the cohort flip thallergenic planets into thanergetic planets so that they can use them and so that the resurrection beasts can't eat them.
Good job, John.
That was such a gentle good job compared to in the notes, dear listener. It says, yes, John.
Also, for the folks at home, I licked my finger and put 1 point on the scoreboard, which you guys obviously could not see. We're still losing a lot. We were wrong so many times, but
actually,
this one,
we got to come up with a document where we literally have a scoreboard of Tamsin versus Brooke and John.
Mostly John. No, it's just John. Tamsin
we're
versus
getting
John.
Absolutely bodied, but yeah, we get our wins here and there.
Okay. So number 4, resurrection beasts travel by periscoping through the river. I think that means they spend most of their self is in the river, and they pop up only part of their self periodically.
I guess so.
The other thing is that they can pop up far away and send, number 5, these external actors. So they have these heralds, which are thousands of semi-insectoid creatures that they can send to attack.
God described these in a way that raised some alarm bells for me on God. He talks about they look like independent creatures, but they're really just extensions of it. And then he gives a series of similes or metaphors. A spider is to a web, as a hand is to a finger, as the RB is to the herald. But he did the hand finger thing, and I'm just so God and hand? Is that how you view your hands?
That is very much there. I feel like that language is very intentional. He definitely sees himself as the one in control, and that these are just a part of him. His lictors are just a part of him, the way heralds are a part of Resurrection
Except
Beast.
to our discussion point earlier,
Are they?
he might not be as in control of them as he apparently thinks he is.
Love it. Yes, completely.
Close that circle.
So here's like a weird kind of last piece, and I think it's important. The Resurrection Beasts and the heralds give some sort of fear to necromancers. They literally make necromancers sick with fear. So like Harrow at the beginning of this book, level sick, where you're just vomiting and screaming all the time.
Get wham-whams.
Luckily, that only happens if you're encountering a resurrection beast while you're in your body. So the necromancers can send their souls into the river to fight the resurrection beast in the river, and they let their cavaliers run the body and fight the heralds because the cavaliers don't get this herald fear.
But only like for 5 minutes at a time, right?
They can only be physically in the river. They can only be with their body in the river for 5 minutes
but
at a
they
time.
can be on the
in the
shores.
river as a soul a lot longer.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
I think. Okay.
Got all that?
Yeah, maybe.
Sure.
Meh.
Ha! All right, so let's move on to Mercy Morn. Mercy Morn, Saint of Joy, is a lot less forthcoming than Augustine. Harrow notes that she had a contentious cavalier. Jod says that the saint names are really for the cavalier, so Joy was meant for Christabel, Mercy's cavalier, who was a delight, according to Jod. Jod also tells Harrow not to mention Christabel to Augustine. But in fact, Mercy is the one who freaks the fuck out over the mention of her cavalier, while Augustine is quite pleasant, although not necessarily complimentary about Christabel.
A delight. Didn't have the intellect you'd normally find in a sandwich or an orange.
The eighth house shall never see her like again.
Jesus Christ. Out of the blue and so good.
He's such a dick, but in the best way. Okay. The only other thing that Harrow really knows about Mercy Morn is that she's a brilliant anatomist. And as we alluded to earlier, she spent a myriad learning anatomy by rote. Augustine points out that the only real reason you would ever need this skill is to kill a lictor, so...
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. Cue the large organ.
Sorry, large organ.
Sorry.
All I could hear is baseball music in my head for some reason when you're saying large organ.
Is that what you mean?
boy,
The da-da-da, da-da,
No,
da-da,
he
da-da?
totally means like a vampire castle organ.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Like Phantom of the
I
Opera.
can't bring
but
a
I still
melody
think,
into my head.
Yeah. And I think
I
Hannah's thinking
still
about a
think
different
large organ is the
yeah.
kind of thing that
Yeah, I
Gideon
know.
would use in order to describe a...
Large
Yes.
organ.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. The only thing that Harrow has to write about the Saint of Duty is this. Ordis, Willem, the first, Saint of Duty, wants me dead.
Okay.
Meanwhile, back at Canaan House, Act 3, the death teacher had promised them.
Let's recap. Broken second house skull. Someone is carrying a lot of anger towards Judith. And a gun.
All right, this chapter opens with Ordis, Abigail, Magnus, and Harrowhark laying out the shredded corpse of Judith Deuteros. She has been shot 8 times in the very definition of overkill. Not only would the first shot have killed her, but the ancient carbine rifle that was used can only fire 6 shots before being reloaded, which means that someone shot Judith, shot her 5 more times, then paused to reload their gun and kept shooting.
I mean, I think you guys have all been there. She said something that made you feel that way. But
I mean, yeah.
She does cause anger. I get it. I really do get it, but this still feels like a lot.
it's a lot.
And the other thing that's wild, of course, is that this weapon that she was killed with is an ancient piece of grave goods. They keep saying it would be like something out of an old story. It just feels wild. So Abigail and Harrow interview Lieutenant Dias, who seems to be in shock.
I could have sworn it was a reference the way that they described her as giving the impression that she was now a bag with 10 snakes inside. I couldn't find a reference for it. And so it just remains this like very strange and uncomfortably good way of representing somebody who, like, can't seem to sit still and is just, like, upset and moving a lot, I guess.
They're wiggling out of their skin and, like, it feels like something's going to escape from them almost, yeah. So Dias tells them that she was in the chamber engaged with the target construct, closed off from where the captain was. To me, that sounds a lot like that test that...
The winnowing.
Yeah. So by the time Marta emerged from the chamber, like when the construct went away and the door opened, Marta comes out and Judith is already dead. The whole thing probably took 5 to 10 seconds. So Marta saw the shooter. It was the sleeper that teacher had warned them about. The sleeper dressed in its orange hazard suit, carrying a rifle. And it walked out to its coffin, climbed inside, and snapped the lid shut. So Marta, you know, they've all been warned to, like, keep quiet, don't wake the sleeper. Marta's like, fuck that, you just killed my, my necromancer, my best friend. Marta pounds on the side, desperately tries to break through, but the coffin doesn't open and the sleeper does not wait.
So, like, when we hear about the sleeper, in my head, this is going to be some sort of, like, bone monster that comes out of nowhere and, like, that was all I was prepared for. There's a literal body in a coffin in the middle of the facility in this version of reality that's wearing an orange hazard suit and is the sleeper, apparently. Like, what the fuck?
It's interesting because the only other orange hazard suit we've seen the entire story thus far going back is what Harrow and the crew are wearing when they're killing the planet, which is just interesting.
Oh, I missed that.
They're both wearing an orange hazard suit and oxygen mask.
Oh.
Interesting. Well, Ortis, because he exists, quotes at Marta from the Noniad. Harrow wishes she had made him take a vow of silence.
But only a very obedient idiot of a cavalier would have stuck to that.
So Marta says one more thing. In its coffin, the sleeper lies on a two-hander sword. So that's delightfully eerie. Guess it's time for a game. Interstitial. You've rendered yourself unlovable. Well, these chapters were, as Brooke pointed out, just a beautiful mosaic of overlapping insults. And so by special request from Brooke this week, we are playing Disgusting Little Cuckoos. In this game, we will ask our hosts to pick their very favorite insults from both within and without the locked tomb. And then, because I think we all need to vent sometimes, we'll spend time crafting insults of our own. So first, what is your favorite literary/movie/TV/podcast/real-life insult that you have encountered outside of the locked tomb? Brooke, what you got?
Okay. The CEO of my company likes to call people donuts. And he uses this when somebody thinks that they're super important, but they're actually, like, very minimally valuable. And I think it's great.
That's exceptional. That's beautiful. John, you have 2 words here that I don't understand.
I wrote Liberty Prime. So for context, in the Fallout universe, Liberty Prime is a giant robot that was designed by the Americans to defeat communism and defeat the Chinese that invaded Alaska. And every time he attacks, or you see him in the series, he's just yelling things that are, like, basically a lampooning of, like, American political speech. Like, he will just, like, shoot a laser at someone and yell, "Democracy is non-negotiable," or "Freedom is the sovereign right of every American," or "Death is a preferable alternative to communism." And so it's just, like, a wonderful insult / lampooning of, like, Americans' ridiculousness. He also yells, I'm just going through all of them, "Communism is a lie. Tactical assessment. Red Chinese victory. Impossible." And it just, like, goes through all these things. "We will not fear the Red Menace." Anyway, it's just like a giant lampooning. It's wonderfully done. It's
so
hilarious.
Fucking funny.
It's great.
That's fabulous. Marie, what do you got?
See, this was something that was not even necessarily meant to be an insult, but it's just like I am constantly perceived just too much. And so my research student told me once, I walked in and he was like, "Oh, you dress kind of like a kindergarten drawing. You know, like how little kids always have, like, you got like a red shirt and like blue pants." And I was like, "I'm pretty sure that's just called color blocking." Thanks.
Kindergarten drawing.
I'm going to start using dress like a kindergarten drawing.
That's harsh.
To be clear, it was not meant to be an insult. It was an observation on me. And I was like,
this is my point. These are some of the most cutting insults. True observations.
Many of my favorite insults come from Veep, but many of them are too crass for me to feel comfortable with. So this is my favorite one that I don't feel uncomfortable with. Jonah, you're not even a man. You're like an early draft of a man where they just sketched out a giant mangled skeleton, but they didn't have time to add details like pigment or self-respect. You're Frankenstein's monster if his monster was made entirely of dead dicks.
Oh, I love Veep.
I don't even know fully what that means, but it's really harsh.
It's very worth watching Veep just for the insults, Brooke, if this is a thing you love.
All right.
All right, so what is our favorite Tamsin original insult? Brooke, do you have one?
I just couldn't get over, and I'm still chuckling about what Augustine was saying about everybody's opinions this week, which was he doesn't give a toot in a hurricane. He views them as a toot in a hurricane. I think that's the funniest thing.
Brooke just giggling to herself is the funniest thing.
Toot in a hurricane is so good. Anyway.
John, what do you have?
I still am throwing it to the mayonnaise uncle, which is just like
it's hard to beat that.
Yeah,
Mwah.
that's so great.
I think in this book, my favorite thing are just like the one-off, like one-word things, like Ianthe calling Harrow crazy cakes, or
So
Mercy
cute.
Morn being like, "You egg!"
You egg. Or she called Augustine a leg at one point.
Yeah, you leg.
Okay, I think she's the worst at insults.
Yeah, but it's so funny because you're just like, what? I'm confused.
Throws you off.
So I think my all-time favorite is Disgusting Little Cuckoo, which is what I named the game. That's what Harrow calls Gideon early, like chapter 1 or 2 in Gideon the Ninth. But I think the meanest is easily the entire Augustine monologue here, where he's like, you have rendered yourself unlovable. You do not matter to him.
Vicious. He's good.
Well, now the part that you've all been waiting for. Let's just open it up to the floor for Insult Mania. Tell us what you're insulting, and then by the Emperor, just go loud.
I want to insult myself first.
Ooh,
Because like Ianthe, I also regularly undersleep. I think that in like pseudo-clinical circles, they call this revenge bedtime procrastination. But really what I'm doing is I'm indulging in a sad and desperate period of introverted selfishness. Because finally, in the dead of the night, nobody will bother me and I can be the happiest.
See, that's not an insult. That was the most
That's an
depressing fucking thing I've ever heard, Brooke.
Pretty insulting.
It's not an insult.
I feel you. John?
So I have two, which is just the inconsiderate people that inhabit the neighborhood that I live in for constantly throwing their leftover food and trash right before they're getting on the bus onto the ground. And I feel like every weekend I come out and I'm having to like drag my dogs past like smoothies and chicken bones and just like all these things that they can't have because these people are too inconsiderate to just like there's trash cans, like throw their stuff in a trash can.
They view
Or
the
just,
ground as their trash bin? What do they think is going to happen? It just magically disappears?
Well, we
Somebody
have
else
rats
comes and does it for
raccoons.
them?
It's New England. There's a lot of rats. The food does disappear within like a day or two because I'm sure
Gross.
the rats or the mice get to
That's
it.
still...
But
It drives me nuts, though, when they've actually put up trash cans, because it also pisses me off places where they haven't put trash cans out, because then I'm like, you're just asking for people to throw away trash on the ground. But it sounds like these people have an option, and they've chosen the wrong one.
My insult is to spring semester just as a concept because it is an insipid, over-promising, soul-devouring academic vampire.
Spring in particular, huh?
Yeah, fall is fine. Spring, fuck spring.
That was a beautiful insult, though. That was really well crafted, Marie. I appreciated
So
that
do
a
you
lot.
feel like a human in fall and then you've
Everybody's
been
happy to
sucked
go back to
dry?
school in fall. Everybody's got energy. Everybody's had a summer break. There's
Yeah.
too much going on in spring. You feel like things should be getting better, but you've just been through winter and winter sucks. And then you have all of these obligations and everybody's exhausted and nobody's happy to be back at school. They're just pissed that they didn't get in a long enough break. Fuck spring.
I am fucking exhausted. I feel you. And I would like to insult raccoons. Happy that you brought them up, John. Raccoons. I see past this cute facade that everyone wants to pretend exists. I get it. You've got a great PR team. They've managed to revamp your image from what you are, which is evil-smelling vicious carnivores digging through the putrid refuse, into sweet little woodland folk with tiny waving paws.
Yes,
But I know you. with your weird dolphin noises and your sharp teeth. I know you're planning something big, and when the day comes that you take up weapons in your creepy little human hands and point them laughing at all the fools who fed you corn on the cob and birdseed and hot dogs, I'll be there with that look on my face like,
They do make dolphin noises. I hadn't thought of it that way.
It's the fucking worst. They make this noise that's like,
It's like what?
Okay, that's hilarious. Zoom does not want you to make
Zoom
that noise,
will
and it
not pick it
specifically
up.
filters it out.
I look forward to you hearing it on the cast. Brooke, do you have anything else you'd like to insult today?
Yes. I have some beef with armchair experts. They need to stop.
I'm feeling really personally attacked right now.
A little bit, me too. It's fine.
Go.
This is for all of us at any moment where you're feeling it. Look, because we have all been here. You get involved in something new, and to be honest, it doesn't seem all that complicated. For most of us, it's not like we're trying to learn brain science or rocket science. It's like growing a couple vegetables in your backyard. But here's the thing. Every time you start doing something like very seriously that is new, you learn so many hard lessons through experience, right? You learn that initially amazing weed cover that you put down to keep the weeds under control, right? Once it's been combined with that really delicious thick layer of mulch starts to break down, it creates the perfect substrate for those weeds. They are the Trojan horses of weed cover, because suddenly these weeds have the perfect substrate for just weaving themselves into a mat, into your weed cover. Anyway, my point is, armchair experts, remember your first time. Remember your completely unwarranted confidence. Look back on the early days of your job, or at the new hires that you now look at today as complete imbeciles, and realize that those new and clickbait-informed ideas that you have about glucose metabolism, narcissistic personality disorder, or climate patterns, it's absolute noob bullshit what you think. Anyway, once, I think this is related, once a farmer told me that he thought that PhD stood for probably hasn't done it, and I think we should carry that with us as experts in our own fields.
Iconic. John, do you want to follow that?
Not really. I feel like it's going to be a letdown.
I have really strong feelings about it.
As you should. Good.
Well, the other one is just that we talked a little bit about this on our Patreon video game memes. Just a quick plug for the Patreon. It was hilarious. But that, like, basically people who play video games generally are just like some of the worst people you'll ever bump into in your life. Like, it's truly a hobby that just attracts terrible, terrible people. The people that have like no media literacy at all, who will tell you that they're tired of video games becoming political and like modern video games are being ruined by politics, while also saying, like, unironically that their favorite games are things like Metal Gear Solid or Fallout or, any of these games that like are just intrinsically have a political message behind them, and you're just like terribly stupid and can't see it or don't have the media literacy to understand it. Oh God, it just makes me so frustrated because every time you have a conversation about it, like, you inevitably bump into those people on the internet because they're such a large portion of that community. Anyway, that's what I got.
I am here for John's video game pedantry. That is mwah.
Agreed.
Speaking of expertise, my
Shots fired.
last insult is for Midwest drivers who refuse to drive like normal humans and instead cause traffic jams with behavior like refusing to zipper merge or waving cars across traffic or rubbernecking at accidents on the other fucking side of the freeway. Also tailgating when you're driving 80 miles per hour in a 65 mile per hour zone. So for all of you, you have pudding for brains, a megalomania that rivals Trump and Vance put together, and you are the source of all of the problems in your own life.
You tell, Marie.
That was gorgeous.
I love that.
Also,
As someone who rubbernecked at baby ducklings yesterday that were on the side of the road.
That's acceptable.
fair.
I would have been like, thank you for slowing down traffic. I did want to see that.
I also
Also, caution.
You
baby
are the
ducks.
Yep. You are the source of all the problems in your life is a fucking deep insult.
I like it.
However, aside from my very intense feelings about raccoons, I suck at insults. So I have instead chosen my last one will be a compliment to you, dear listener.
Hannah, you
last
always
time.
do this. You always do this. You're like, let's insult everybody. And then you're like, except I'm going to be the nice one and give a compliment at the end. Fuck you.
You know how like
Wait,
Mercy
are you
always lies?
really complaining about somebody not following the rules of the game? All of your 2 truths and a lie are basically 3 half lies.
I mean, I guess we are in the insult game. Continue, Hannah.
No, but this is exactly like, Mercy always lies when you don't expect her to and doesn't lie when you do expect her to. And I am exactly that with cheating at games. Like, I never cheat when you expect me to, and then I immediately cheat at shit like this. Okay.
It's the only time cheating works.
All right, here we go. A compliment for you, dear listener. You have the taste and charm of a third house princess, Corona, not Ianthe, obviously, and the sleek and fabulous hair of a third house prince. Mm-hmm. You have the fierceness of a fourth house warrior and the gentleness of a seventh house rose gardener and the quick and agile mind of a sixth house scholar. And what's better than any of that is that you don't fit any of their stupid stereotypes. You are, in fact, uniquely your own, and uniquely faceted and completely undefinable. All your experiments probably worked the first time with no optimization. You only procrastinate because you're so incredibly fast and good you didn't need to start earlier. You are so cool that in everyone's mind, you're permanently wearing sunglasses. 10 out of 10 would recommend to a friend.
Thank you, Hannah. I do feel that way about myself all the time.
As you should.
You do have the sleek and wonderful hair of a third house prince.
I wish. I try.
I genuinely do believe that I procrastinate because I am good enough to get it done in the last hour. And frankly, I've not been proved wrong so far. So.
Hell yeah. Cool.
That did relieve my feelings quite a bit. I hope it helped you all. But these goddamn 10-year-olds are always clamoring for more, so we're just going to jump right on into rampant speculation. Act 4, the rather dangerous game you're playing. Brooke and John might be children, but their conspiracy theories are as good as any 10,000-year-old lictor. So, Brooke, John, what the fuck is happening?
I have bullet points in my notes, but really what I want to pick on more than anything else is the characterization that Augustine gave us of Jod's chasing after resurrection beasts. Because Jod characterized the fight against the resurrection beast as a defensive act, right? Like this was like back in chapter 2 or something. Mm-hmm. Running away, distracting them. But Augustine calls it a 10,000-year search and destroy mission out of purely symbolic retribution. That is different. And that can explain kind of maybe why the lictors and God are on the same page, is God is doing this out of like revenge, whereas like he pretends it's for the greater good.
Yeah, nothing has changed my mind. I'm sure again, multifaceted, but I still think God's a bad person.
Black and white, right? Maybe. Yes, but I think you're right. He's a darker gray. Mm-hmm. Anyway. Right. We also learned that AL was a woman and was Jod's bodyguard. And the past tense was, we've had her crossed out, blah, blah, blah. So the question is that the act of retribution somehow related to AL?
I got nothing on that. We have like no context yet for that, so I don't know.
Flinging things out. Okay.
Yep.
I think the last thing that I really want to talk about or just pose into the ether is how the hell is Sleeper related to Gideon and the two-hander, and is this at all related to the two-hander sword that Harrow has having hatred? Is this supposed to be an explanation? I don't know how we're going to merge it together because I still don't understand like the alternative history part, or like the I guess like Gideon the Ninth. Like we need like a term for it, basically, like the alternative history. Like, is that what all right, we'll say alternative history.
I've been calling it just Meanwhile Back at Canaan House.
Okay, yeah. Meanwhile Back at Canaan House. I am firmly now of the belief that there was some type of soul in the two-hander. It might not be Gideon anymore, but like the sword wanted to stab Kithaerea to get into the body, right? Like, and that's why the thing is moving, is like there like something with murder. I don't know. Like, I find it weird, and it like gave me that feeling that I always had at like the back, like the tickling or prickling on the back of my neck. Yeah, an itch of like the first book when Tamsin would drop like these huge things that would become later, and you're just like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, why are we explaining that? And that's how I kind of felt like with the explanations of the resurrection beast and revenants and how things jump from souls to soul. And now I'm just like, definitely a soul jumped from the sword into Kithaerea's body when Harrow woke up and like the sword had stabbed itself through Kithaerea. I think whatever was in the sword saw an opportunity to get into an empty vessel that is like being kept basically in an undecayed state.
What?
Because like the body's not dying, right? In theory, it's just like a recently vacated vessel that God himself is keeping like pristine. The body's not aging, the roses aren't aging, so it's just like a recently dead vessel. So anyway, that's my theory for this week: is that something jumped from the sword to Kithaerea, and that's why she's twitching.
Because it's also the murder weapon, her murder weapon.
Yes.
Okay, this is all fascinating, but I have to admit, I officially am going to challenge you both to tell me what the fuck is happening with the Meanwhile Back at Canaan House. We've just been skipping past that as though it's okay that that is in direct conflict with what we read and talked about for a full year. All right, 6 months. I don't know how long we've been doing the podcast.
I have to think it's part of, and this goes back to what we were talking about, I think in like our first or second episode of Harrow, which is that we still think that there's some type of thing, and now it's probably Harrow did it to herself, where she like uses necromancy to basically excise Gideon and parts from her brain. Because we still think Ordis is Gideon. Like there's a lot of stuff there. I think it's like an alternative history, but like that's basically like her brain filling in the gaps for like excising out Gideon. And like that basically all of that. At least that's my current theory, is that it's like not like it's a hypothetical alternative timeline that's like exists only in Harrow's brain. If it isn't, and we're going to be dealing with like actual different timelines, oh god, our murder board is going to be an entire wall.
I guess we'll see if any of that happens next time when John and Brooke become intimately familiar with the Saint of Duty in Harrow the Ninth Chapters 19 to 22.
And if you, dear listener, are, like me and John, reading along for the first time, make sure you find our reading calendar on our website, frontlinefifth.podbean.com, or follow us on Instagram or TikTok. To support us, you can buy merch or join our Patreon, all of which are linked in the show notes. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends and give us a 5-star rating anywhere you can. And if you didn't like it, feel free to lie. Now head off to sleep, my baby necros, because Mommy and Daddy have some deep spoilers to discuss.
Get in, losers. We're going speculating.
Act 5. Back to the bad old tricks of decades past.
This portion of the podcast is 98% spoilers and like 2% snickering.
Gotta say the warning.
Warning. Sorry. Warning. This portion of the podcast is 98% spoilers and 2% snickering.
Seriously, we will spoil anything and everything in the series up through Nona the Ninth. If that's not what you want, turn back now.
I have 3 notes because I think we can start out with the holy shit, they're too goddamn smart.
Oh my god, sorry, they're incredible. I love that Brooke is still on the Calamities track. Like, amazing. I fucking love.
Well, she says, what does Cam have of pals? And I was like, pieces of pals.
We were like, she has pal. Physically. I also loved, so I had put in the notes this week, did we ever talk about why Harrow stabs Kith in the first place? And you had put a note here that says exactly what John said.
Right. Yeah, he's like, oh, the sword wanted to stab Kith to get into the body. Okay, yeah. John. And then you led them. You're like, so what the hell's going back at Canaan House? And he was like, oh, she excised Gideon. And so that's why there's an alternate history. It's like her brain memories. And I'm like, so close.
I know, exactly. Well, so like they have been murder reporting about whether she like excised these memories, which is dead on. But I like they still believe exactly what I believed, which was that the Canaan House stuff was her filling in the gaps, was made up memories. But it is such insane made up memories. Like to have added in, so like especially now when we start getting these murders, murder by gun is not close to something that Harrow has experienced before. It's not something that she would casually insert. She could have casually inserted people getting killed by bone monsters, but she didn't. And I think that's actually a pretty clear indication that this is something bigger and different from just her brain trying to create new memories. It's an interesting one. They did great, though. I'm so proud of them. I have a couple of questions that I want to talk about this week. This is a weird thing, but I mostly just want to bring it up. There are incredibly specific details in the Lictor Mausoleum where Kithraea's body is.
Right.
And they are different from the way any other part of the Mithraeum is described. There are enormous steel-edged columns with twisting wires and bones threaded through them under smoked glass. And there are glistening strands of fat around threads of copper, clearly like as insulation. We already know that copper was thought to be somehow impassable by spirits. We know that from the mysterious study of Dr. Sex, and we know that it's not impassable. So in my head, I feel like this is like some sort of weird warding to try and keep the lictors where they are.
When the Mithraeum is first brought up to us or first described, he says this is where we ran first.
Yeah.
And that it's a Thanner energetic part of space.
Oh, that's interesting.
I have to
definitely
double
remember-
check that. It's
Yeah.
like very much like it is a like another base
Somehow
like
protected.
surrounded by Thanergy planets. And I don't remember if he says that it's Thanergetic or not.
That's interesting.
So that's probably something to kind of like look back at. But it's almost like, okay, is this like a beacon of some sort? Or is this like how they anchor themselves there and it's not a steely, but it's like how they find where it is?
At some point, Harrow does say that like any necromancer would be able to detect it from really far away because it just basically is flashing, hello, we're dead. Like you can feel how much the energy is in the void of space through the Mithraeum. Yeah, there's something really weird here. There's something truly weird about this mausoleum. All right, here's my question. Harrow asks Ianthe if she can hear movement, and Ianthe says no, crazy cakes. So, is she already gaslighting Harrow, or is she just not paying attention?
I think yes. I think it's the same thing of like later on when Kethrea climbs under her bed.
You think she is gaslighting Harrow? She like can see it or hear it. I mean, it is actually a really classic psychological control technique that cult leaders use to keep people uncertain about whether what they know is true. It makes them reliant on the other person for confirmation. It means you can control what they see and hear and believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we do our Gideon references?
Absolutely. I mean, the obvious one is Pommel.
Yeah, Pommel. So the very first one, it starts with, "You had always liked to write notes." I was like, that one feels like it could go either way, but I'm like, that's kind of Gideon.
Yeah, that feels like that's Gideon being like, yet more of this.
Yep. And then they're describing the ninth house rapier. And it says, "At the termination of each wire was a single canine tooth, and the end, Pommel, was a soft, worn knob of black dyed bone."
It's still funny. I love it because like the energy is, it's not that fucking hard, Harrow. It's just one word.
The as we have already brought up in the episode, "You did not examine Eat It Dripping, as maybe you should have." And then it's talking about like watching Ianthe spar and Augustine being mad at her, and it said, "From what little you could tell, her form was perfect. Her lines were exquisite. She never dropped the sword or fumbled with it," which proved again how inadequate a standard what little you could tell was.
You're like, she's pretty good.
She's pretty good. She never drops a sword.
No,
You're like,
Harrow,
"What?"
that is not sufficient.
Yeah. Okay, now we can move on. We can move on to the bubble.
Hold on, because this goes to Gideon. Although, so these are not Gideon coming through references, but these are Easter eggs, so they kind of remind me of it. In the bubble, there were some good Easter eggs and callbacks that I liked. So it would be like being set upon by a ghost out of time, because that's like exactly what it is, basically. And like something from an old story, which I like because effectively we think that the bubble is like a play. They are acting out a story. So there is some of that element to it. But the great Easter egg and callback is, of course, Harrow regretted not making him take a solemn pledge of silence. Only a real idiot of a cavalier would have accepted something like that.
I also like that as we're talking about like the pommel, there's a point in here where Harrow says, "This weapon can only fire 6 projectiles before being needed to replenished." "Reloaded," said Abigail, helpfully.
Yes.
So it's like priming you of like the little, hey.
Yeah, someone else fixing your terminology.
With correct terminology.
Yeah. Oh, man.
It like this is another key that starts showing you like what is going on in the play, in the river bubble.
Yeah.
Is Dias being like, "Why am I here?"
Yeah, she's so confused. She keeps saying, "I just want to know. I just want to understand."
And that's like some of like the first stuff. It's really interesting to like watch the ghosts because I think it has to do with Abigail figures it out immediately.
Yes.
And then she starts talking to the other spirits and trying to be like, yeah, what actually is going on here? But like reassuring them. But it's like Dias hadn't been pulled in yet.
Yeah. So this was something actually that I thought was interesting. Dias is pulled in not for this moment, but somehow for Judith's death. Like Marta must have been pulled in earlier than this moment where we see her, because what she's reporting is that she did a series of steps, that she saw the sleeper, that she like was banging on the outside. But she certainly was pulled in quite recently because she does not understand what's going on. And it's another one of these beautiful, beautiful moments that Tamsin creates where you can easily dismiss this as like the unbearable shock of having had this horrific thing happen next to her, this unthinkable thing that no one could have prepared for because guns don't even exist really. You know, so like her intense fear and I just want to know how it happened, what's happening here, why am I here, I just want to understand, is something you can dismiss as being part of trauma, but in fact is literally because she has just been pulled out of the river and into a bubble where she is now acting in a play as a dead-ass spirit ghost. It's some fucking crazy psyche shit that Tamsin's doing, and I love it. I also, sorry, this is a brief thing and it's nothing, but I just think it's funny because John was like, we've never seen anyone in orange hazard suits except for Harrow on the planet. And I was like, ha ha ha, you don't remember that Gideon's mom was in an orange hazard suit when she fell down in, you know, literally chapter 1 of Gideon the Ninth. Okay, so this is a quick note about Ianthe and Corona taking over the world. Ianthe says that all the time that she was carrying off Corona's con, she learned that shame was a privilege. But she says Corona's con. And I think it's so interesting because this is something we talked about in As Yet Unsent, where Judith basically says Corona would never be able to like carry off a con that she had not come up with or would be willing to do a plan that she had not instigated.
Yeah, that great catch. That is a fantastic catch. I think that I maybe subconsciously caught it a little bit and was like, oh, there's something there. But I
definitely, this was like a third read of the chapter this week. And I was like, wait a second.
Corona's con.
The other thing I wanted to know was, so obviously Ianthe is obsessed with ghosts and liminal spaces and hell. Do we think that she deliberately decided to study liminal spaces as part of whatever the fuck their power play was?
Yeah.
Or was she just being a necromancer? Is this, because it seems increasingly, as I'm like buying into Ianthe and Corona taking over the world, I think that almost everything they've done is deliberate. It makes me wonder whether liminal spaces plays into this.
I think it's like they were trying to start figuring out lictorhood.
Earlier even than being at Canaan House. I buy that. I actually really buy that.
They wanted to know what lictorhood is. And then once, because I think it even goes into like later on, like there's kind of hints later in Harrow and then hints later in like Nona, where it's like once she attains lictorhood, they want to figure out what God has.
Yeah, they really are trying to go the full fucking distance. It's going to be very interesting.
I have something that is theory-wise, which is Augustine says the power doesn't flow both ways.
So the question is then, the power doesn't flow both ways in a normal lictor. Is that the context?
Yeah. So does that go, because that's him explaining what happens when your soul leaves the body and your cavalier is left behind. You don't do necromancer. Your cavalier can't do anything with necromancy.
Right. The question that you have here is what happens if the power does flow both ways? Is that a perfect lictorhood? And of course, we have this very weird scenario where we have two versions of what is theoretically perfect lictorhood. We have Cam and Pal becoming Paul in one body together. And then we have God and Electo who retained two separate beings, but sort of did a crossover game. So either one of those, I think that's really fucking interesting. And it would be interesting to know whether Electo's power is dependent on Jod's continued existence.
Oh, right. Because then it's very much you can't kill Jod, or you need Electo to become have a different
power structure
or different power structure. But she's big enough that she might be able to if she severed herself from Jod. Maybe that's part of what the pact was with Anastasia.
Is cutting Jod away, but binding herself to Anastasia instead.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So like having like an additional binding to Anastasia's line.
No, this is
so
super,
that there
super
would
interesting.
always be somebody so that if God did die.
She has a backup plan. She has a failsafe in the Ninth House Necromancer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's really interesting. The last thing I wanted to like float by you is actually Augustine and Mercy's conversation. So the battle tricks of decades past, the only thing we really know is that Augustine and Mercy conspired to create Gideon the Ninth. But obviously she's not doing that again. So what are these battle tricks of decades past? We know she's interfacing with Blood of Eden, but we don't know why. And he says this really fucking weird thing. He says, but does John know? And Mercy says, that's a foul implication. And I don't know what that means. It implies almost that like John did know at some point, or potentially that's a foul implication. There's something fucking weird here. I just don't know I don't know yet what Mercy is currently planning with Blood of Eden.
I wonder if it's something about like they're digging up history.
Interesting.
Like they know that they don't know.
Yeah.
Or they realize at some point that because what if he did something, there's all this stuff with the bubbles. What if he did something where that's how he implanted their memories?
Oh, interesting. I actually fucking love that they have very real memories of going through these circumstances, except they happened in a river bubble or something like that, where like it did actually happen to them.
Yeah, where he creates some sort of a river bubble to play through everything that leads up to. But because it's similar to how Harrow's bubble breaks down, it doesn't.
That potentially stuff leaks in or stuff leaks out, or
they catch
other
the
people end up with control.
and then they can remember.
Yeah. Oh. This is going to be really, really interesting to play into. God, I can't wait for fucking Electo. I really can't. And there's this moment at the end of Harrow where Augustine, basically, John confirms that Augustine was a pre-resurrection man, and Augustine says, thank you for confirming that, which means he doesn't know. He doesn't remember. Like, I think there's a lot of gaping holes in everybody's understanding. We've talked a lot about not inconsistent narrators. What are they called? Unreliable narrators.
Right. But like, why are you unreliable? A lot of the time it's just unreliable because their perspective is skewed. They don't have the information. And when you're looking through their perspective, there's no way. So it's not truly an unreliable narrator. I don't know if it has another name, but it's like.
Right. I like ignorant
perspective. An ignorant perspective.
Yeah, an ignorant narrator, an unreliable perspective. I like that a lot. And I think it is actually interesting, just like more broadly in general, where, for instance, Brooke clocked the fact that Jod thinks of his lictors, his hands, as part of himself and as though he has control. And we know that they've all been fucking, back channeling and all been treasonous.
And he might think that he has more power than he does.
Yes. I like the idea that literally everyone is operating under false assumptions here. There's not a single person who would be a correct narrator.
Maybe that's what the bad old tricks are, is finding a way to basically bypass any compulsion that Jod has over you and then saying, oh, but does John know? That's a foul implication that I have given up my compulsion.
Yeah, that's interesting. Woo! I'm excited. Act 6. See you next time, my little nunlets. Well, we need to head off because I definitely see the Saint of Duty headed our way, but we will be back next week to narrowly escape several murder attempts in Harrow the Ninth, chapters 19 through 22. If you want to follow along with us, our reading calendar is available on our website at frontlinefifth.podbean.com, and you can follow us on TikTok and Instagram, which are linked in the show notes. If you enjoyed this podcast, please tell your friends and give us a 5-star rating anywhere you can. And of course, if you didn't enjoy the podcast, feel free to lie. We have a Patreon, which you can join for access to bonus content every month. You can become a patron, and oh, do we love our patrons, at patreon.com/frontlinefifth. And you can check out our merch at our Redbubble store linked in the show notes. Finally, if you have any fun theories you'd like to share with us, feel free to email us at frontlinefifth@gmail.com. And with that, I'll just remind you not to unlock any tombs or enter any doors without permission because, ghosts. Bye!
Frontline Fifth is a Locked Tomb podcast conceived by Maria Adamako and starring Maria Adamako, Hannah Grunwald, Brooke Anderson, and John Ryan. Our cover art was designed and created by Maria Adamako, who also edited this episode. Our fabulous music was composed and recorded by Blake Anderson. Sonia Grunwald designs our killer merch. Hot. Gorgeous. The Locked Tomb series is a completely dope-ass book series by Tamsin Muir, who does not know we exist and is in no way affiliated with this podcast. I'm sure she'd love our merch, though.